Let's bring Jeff Pasquino from the footballguys.com into the conversation for this week's Fantasy Focus. Jeff will give us some of his favorite sleepers, and we'll answer your fantasy football questions, get some questions on a lot of the big names that have been coming in as we are into week 2 of the fantasy football season. Jeff, welcome back. How are you?
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing good. And, we got the week started off with the Bills and the Jets with some big fantasy games there. Greg Roman fired, though, for his efforts, so some of the Bills players should be very interesting. But now we jump into the Sunday games, and let's see what questions we got coming in. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball, and I want to start with Eli Manning. The game against the Saints last year was an offensive explosion. Should Eli Manning be in the lineup against the Saints this week?
Well, we have the top 3 candidates this week, no doubt. The only concern now is weather. There could be some rain and wind coming up to the northeast, so we'll have to see how that impacts. But on paper, this is a great matchup, and we saw what happened with the Saints last week and how Oakland tore them apart. So we really like Eli Manning and Odell Beckham Jr. as well this week.
All right. How about Matt Stafford against the Titans? A lot of questions about him without Calvin Johnson. Did he put them to rest enough for you to say put him in your lineup?
Here's the question right now: was last week's performance how good Stafford is and the rest of the team, or how bad the Colts defense was? So it's kind of probably somewhere in the middle. We're going to learn a lot more this week with Tennessee. They played relatively well against Minnesota. They gave 2 defensive touchdowns. I like Stafford as a low quarterback one, but I'm not completely sold on him yet.
How about Joe Flacco? He's a good NFL quarterback, but is he a good fantasy quarterback this week against a pretty bad Browns team?
Well, Flacco has done very well in the past against the Browns. I think his last 10 appearances, he's 15-5 in touchdowns. Not a ton, but there's expected to be 24-plus points for the Ravens this week, and most of it's going to come to the passing game. I think a relatively low-owned Joe Flacco. He's a quarterback, too, this week. He's got good upside. I also like Dennis Pitta as a sleepy tight end to use.
Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com. If you have a fantasy football question, you can text it to our Dubell Lumber text board at 609-403-0973. A lot of questions coming in. We'll get those to Jeff in just a minute. Everyone's talking about Carson Wentz. Should he be in your lineup, though, for fantasy football?
Not just yet, unless you're in a 2-quarterback league. I think he's got good upside. In the right matchup, he's solid. But the Bears, on Monday night, it's a big stage. He's on their first NFL road game. I would wait and see.
All right, let's go to how about Kirk Cousins? Had a good fantasy year last year. Really struggled the other night in the opener, facing the Cowboys this week.
I think that he's going to have to throw a lot this week. I think he's a borderline quarterback one. I would use him. Dallas is going to be running the ball a lot against that Washington defense who gave up a lot of yards to D'Angelo Williams last week. I think Cousins is going to have to throw a lot, and their ground game in Washington is not solid.
Jeff, let's go to the running back spot here. Actually, got some questions coming in about quarterbacks. I'll ask a question. How about Big Ben or Carr this week? Oakland going with Carr, obviously. They got an interesting matchup that could be favorable for Carr. But Big Ben, man, he lit it up last week.
He did, and as long as the weather holds out, I think that we have a potential shootout between Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. That could be it could be a defensive struggle, it could be a shootout. But I like both Roethlisberger and Carr. It's a close call. Weather would impact my decision, but I think I lean to Roethlisberger.
Okay, let's go to running back here, and a lot of interesting running back names. Let's go with Kansas City. 2 offensive guards going to miss the game. Spencer Ware, Charchandrick West. What's the story in Kansas City this week?
It is a full-blown timeshare, and that's part of the concern right now about who you want to use there. Ware looks to be the goal line back. West is going to be used more inside between the 20s, but as you said, we have some offensive line questions. So I think Spencer Ware drops down significantly in the list from a running back 1 must start to a running back 2.
LeGarrette Blount, you never know what to do with Patriot running backs, but are you trusting him against the Dolphins?
I have him as a running back 2. I would trust him because the game script kind of favors New England to be ahead of Miami, and I think they're going to put the ball in the hands of Blount and control the ball on the ground. The concern there is that Miami did a pretty good job of shutting down Seattle last week on the road. So I think Blount's got some upside, but I would keep him as a 2.
Carlos Hyde, 168 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he's facing Carolina on the road. You playing him?
No. San Francisco is going to get hammered this week because they have the shortest schedule, and Carolina has the longest. Carolina played last Thursday. San Francisco played late into Tuesday morning, and now they have to fly to the East Coast at 1 p.m., which is 10 a.m. on the biological clock. I want no part of the 49ers this week. I love Carolina.
How about Jeremy Langford up against the Eagles? Langford getting a lot of the Forte touches. He looks like one of the few three-down backs in the league.
He looks pretty good. I still hold out some hope for Howard as a backup there, but I think Langford looks solid. Let's see how they do against a little bit better competition this week.
Did we straighten out the Washington running back situation?
No, that's completely bent. I think you got Jones as the top guy, but he couldn't really move the ball at all. It's going to be a passing game, so look for Chris Thompson to be more of a PPR value, and Jones is going to keep dropping in the list.
All right, some more fantasy football questions coming in from our listeners. Text 609-403-0973 on the Dubell Lumber text board. Another quarterback question, Carson Palmer or Matt Ryan this week?
I would go with Carson Palmer. I think Matt Ryan, I think that's going to be a shootout, but both his top receivers are a little bit dinged between Sanu and Julio Jones. So I think Matt Ryan has some upside, but I would lean against him this week.
All right, let's go to the wide receivers and get some takes from Jeff here. These are questions that have been coming in for the week. A lot of the players people have been asking about. We try to get as many as we can for Jeff here in the time we allow. So if we don't ask your question, we're sorry. But let's go to Mohamed Sanu against the Raiders. What are you thinking about him this week?
I think he's solid value if his ankle holds up. I think that could be a shootout. But like I said, there's some medical concerns on both receivers for Atlanta this week.
Got Sterling Shepard. A lot of people asking about him because, I guess, the matchup, the Saints. We talked about Eli. So is Sterling Shepard a guy you're playing?
I would start every Giant I could against the Saints. Not only are they bad, but they just lost their top cornerback. So I think that the Giants threw 3 touchdowns. None of them went to Beckham. So it's a passing game. Everybody's in play for the Giants this week.
All right. How about Mike Evans or Larry Fitzgerald at wide receiver this week? Need one of those guys. Tough.
Larry Fitzgerald saw 11 targets. I would lean towards him, but I like Tampa Bay as well. It really depends on which cornerback from Arizona is going to be lined up on Evans. I think they're going to put their better guy on him, which leaves open Vincent Jackson for a very sleepy play if you need a flex spot.
All right. Locally here, you got the injury to Zach Ertz. Are you playing Trey Burton or Brent Selleck if you're an Eagle fan out there?
Only if I get points for blocks. So I think both those guys are going to be glorified tackles this week. Most of your targets are going to go to your Matthews brothers. You got Ryan, you got Jordan. And I think Darren Sproles is going to get back in the mix and see more of the short targets that were going to tight end.
Wide receiver question for you here. Philip Dorsett or Chris Hogan from New England. He had a good week last week, Hogan.
Chris Hogan is fool's gold, and I'll tell you why. He got open against that rookie cornerback I was mentioning for Arizona who blew a coverage, and he walked into the end zone, did virtually nothing anyway. So I would lean against him. I'm sorry, who was the other wide receiver?
Chris Hogan or Philip Dorsett?
I would lean towards Dorsett, even though it's a tough matchup against Denver. It's a tight call on either one. I would lean towards Dorsett.
All right, some more questions coming in. Let's get a running back question for you. Mark Ingram or Theo Riddick?
I like Ingram a lot. I think the Saints are going to try and control the ball, keep their defense off the field, and if it's sloppy conditions, I love Ingram as a running back 1 this week.
Should Devonta Freeman be a running back 1 this week is another question coming in.
I think he's splitting time in the backfield, so he's more of a 2.
All right, here's a question. Might be a Dynasty League owner. Better rookie year, Sterling Shepard, Will Fuller, or Eli Rogers?
I would go with Will Fuller because I think he's looking very promising. Had a great game in week 1. He looks set to be the starter and see lots of targets every week.
All right, this is Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com, answering all of your fantasy football questions, or as many as we can fit in as time allows. Go ahead, Pete.
Hey, Jeff, at this time, people are always looking for sleepers, especially with some early season injuries. Who are some guys that are under the radar still?
Sleepers. Well, we mentioned Will Fuller, and Eli Rogers looks good. There was no real must pick up this week. I think Dixon as a running back in Baltimore is going to be a starter in a few weeks. And if for some reason Josh Gordon is available in your league because of the suspension, I would grab him as well. But they'll start to emerge. We'll get even more names as we get on there, but it was a slow week 1 for pickups.
It was. It will continue to evolve, excuse me, as the weeks go on here. Some sleepers there for you and all your fantasy football questions. Jeff Pasquino from the footballguys.com helping to set your week 2 fantasy football lineup. Thank you, Jeff. Good luck to you.
Thank you, guys, and as always, enjoy the games.